Hello, hello, hello. Welcome everybody to the Lenko Show, and this is Chris Lenkowski doing the introduction this time. What a lovely surprise for everyone. Today is episode 58, and we've got an interesting part one of what we feel is going to be a three-part series on how to be awesome at anything. So, Alex, how you feel about this one?
I'm liking this. I'm liking this for a number of reasons. Well, I like arguing with people, and I know we've had a few little conversations in the background about this and how to go about it, and we have some slightly differing angles. So hopefully, will result in some sort of conclusion where you realise I am indeed correct, and you are somewhat misguided. But we'll see how we get there, shall we?
Well, do you know what I think is interesting? So a lot of people say when they talk about the differences between myself and you, they say that we are the same person, but we go about things completely differently.
Yeah.
And it means that today, hopefully, or over the next three podcasts, we are going to be covering all grounds because the people that resonate with everything that you say will resonate with what you're saying and they'll go about things your way. And then hopefully the people that are not understanding where you're coming from, they'll be able to resonate with what I say and they'll be able to, and therefore we are affecting 100% of the target audience, which is good times.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
cool. All
So,
right. So
go on.
I was,
I'm
well, I
messing
was,
up
do
your intro now. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
you know what, mate? I've 58 episodes I've let you introduce us. 58. Well, actually, I've not been in 58, but for the best part of 58, you've done the introduction. If you don't mind, I'd like 3 minutes. Okay. On that note, Alex, how do we become awesome at anything?
So I think my main key to this is visualization and using your mind more than your body, using your mind to control your body in a sense, and breaking it down to get yourself in the right state first and foremost. Like I've recorded episodes on this podcast, and I know you've been present on some of those episodes where we've been speaking about the state of flow. I know we've both been to Tony Robbins, and that's a huge part of what he does. And it's more about your energy, your mental state, and your thought processes going into either learning information, developing a skill, um, and practicing that versus necessarily just going in and throwing your hand at it and kind of, I suppose, making mistakes, but taking it down the purely physical route versus the route of doing nothing. So I'm hoping that I've got enough evidence and enough about me to back myself up today and stand my corner. And like I said, hopefully people will engage with that and understand the thought process behind it and then put it into action. But I think either way, I mean, we're both pretty good at certain things. Um, so we'll get there in some way, one way or another.
Well, absolutely. I have no doubt that we'll get there. All right, talk us through it then. Where do we start?
So, well, I mean, I think the importance of visualization in the first place is understanding what you're trying to achieve, understanding the skill, the components involved, the necessary movement patterns, and then also like what environment do you then have to apply that skill. So I know for me in American football, I can speak quite openly about this situation because I've done it for so long, but the skill of kicking a field goal or whether it's punting the ball into the corner or kicking off, like you have to have a plan of your intended outcome in the first place. I know in my mind how I want it to look first. That's always the first reminder. And then I've got various things that I do to put myself in the correct state of relaxation or the correct state of flow. So I generally refer to that as everyone has a dial for flow in terms of their emotional energy, intensity, aggression. And for example, someone who is 1 out of 10 in their dial, they might be really relaxed, almost laid back, very much chilled out. Like Usain Bolt, probably a mint character and a great example of someone that's dead relaxed to be able to perform to a very high level. Then on the opposite end of the scale, you might have someone who's a 10 out of 10 and needs to be really hyped up, really aggressive. And then we all sit somewhere in that zone on that dial. So you have to get yourself in the right mental state first. Because I know if I go out there and I'm trying to kill a ball, that's going to work better for me than if I'm kind of just dead easy going and I'm not too bothered about what I'm doing. There's no urgency. There's no kind of intense focus or concentration. It's a very different mindset to be in. It's a very different state to be in out on the pitch. So being able to get your mind in the right place for starters is crucial to learning the skill and actual execution of the skill in the moment.
Okay. So what about if you're an absolute beginner and it's like your first time doing something? Do you still agree then?
Absolutely. So is one of and with specifically with regards to learning new movements in the gym, right? One of the things that happens, whether you're novice, whether you're advanced, is people spend too much time doing it wrong, reinforcing faulty movement patterns, rather than understanding and using the brain to actually engage in what it feels like to get it right. And I feel like you need to be getting it right way more than you're often getting it wrong. So some real simple steps to visualization: relaxation, quiet space, think it through, gain clarity on it. And I'm going to find my notes on this, but you need to be able to focus your mind and think about the skill you're trying to perform, whether it's a deadlift, a clean and jerk, a snatch, bench press, whatever the movement or whatever the skill is. Like, find quite a comfortable spot, relax, focus your mind on it, think about the positions you need to be executing, and then that follows on into getting a state of clarity. Be able to define the skill or the outcome that you want to visualize, be specific with it, be specific about the details of the environment, the people involved, your own actions. What's it going to look like? And I know I spend a lot of time when I'm teaching movements. This is on a slight tangent, but when I spend a lot of time teaching movements, it's not a case of, right, let's do 1,000,000 reps. Let's get you in the right position and hold you in that position for a period of time. So your central nervous system understands this is how it feels. Your muscles are in a position where they're going to be in that position during the movement. So like if it's a hinge, if it's a deadlift, let's make sure your back angle is correct, your spine straight, you hinge your hips back, you load up everything as you should. And if you're perfect, hold it there, keep it there 5 to 10 seconds, stand back up. You're probably going to do half the reps or even a quarter of the reps that you might do normally in a regular set. But if you're doing every single one correct versus a regular set where you're hitting 10 to 20 reps and half of them are wrong, who's got the better learning effect? That's my thing. More time in the correct positions, more time doing the right thing and building the right thing into your central nervous system will have ultimately a better outcome. Then step number 3, sensory engagement. So engage all your senses whilst you're visualizing. Imagine sound, sight, smells, taste, physical sensations, like where you are, especially in a sporting environment. Like obviously if you're going into a big CrossFit competition, or ultimately for a lot of my footballers, I recommend 100% getting out there as soon as you can, do a pitch walk, do a field walk, get used to the stadium, get used to the environment around you, get used to, this goes all down to home field advantage, doesn't it? Where you're familiar with everything, you understand where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be there, how it feels, what it smells like. It's all familiar. And once a skill or the environment and everything becomes familiar, you become more comfortable, you're a bit more relaxed, you can be more focused and more dialed in rather than wondering about, what's next, where do I go now, with a load of uncertainty built in. And I realize that we're talking about this from multiple angles at the minute, whether it's like competing in sporting environments and learning skills, but I feel like there's a lot of crossover. And again, with football being out on the pitch, like you see, if you're in an away ground and everything looks slightly different, there might be a stand that finishes at a certain point. There might be things in the background, whether it's tall buildings, multiple things going on, where if you can kind of imprint those into your mind as to like where they are spatially, that might be something that you notice whilst you're trying to make a pass, and you get your passing angles more accurate. You get used to the distances and perspective. Maybe there's a hill or a slope on the pitch, or, you know, there's so many factors that go into those instantaneous moments of skill that you might as well spend time visualizing what's going on, because you're never going to necessarily get the chance to perform the physical repetition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so there's a few things that I'm thinking there. So what about if you visualize a specific scenario, but then the actual, when it comes to the actual doing and the physical, I guess the action, and it's a totally different environment to what you visualized. Are you then
How would that happen? What do you mean? I feel
so
this is good, this, because I feel like you're grilling me. Let's go.
yeah, so what I'm thinking, right, is first of all, I don't disagree with you, but I am still seeing it completely differently. Like I can't quite see your dots coming together yet. So for me, I think it's a case of it's an interesting one because I'm almost in a little bit of dissonance at the minute. So thinking you just got to go out there and do it first, which is obviously like the opposite of what you said in terms of you've got to be doing it right. Spend time if you're going to practice doing things correctly, which I can level with that because I know if I had a new person come to me and we were going through, I'm specifically thinking about like if they were doing like some form of strength training, I absolutely would not let them like just tear themselves apart doing movement for the sake of movement that's just not going to benefit them. But at the same time, when I think on a sport level of me doing, let's say, CrossFit, for example, it was just a case of just get involved and just start doing it first before I was thinking about visualization. And I think more than that, it was kinesthesia, which is kind of what you said about spending time being in the right positions. It was more get some kinesthesia and some feedback and learn how it feels when you do some reps, when you do some right, when you do some wrong, you'll feel a little bit of a difference. And then when you've got some experience of doing it, you can then start refining the process. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. But it's almost that's almost like saying, let's throw some shit at the wall and see if it sticks. Although that's not quite accurate, but because I understand where you're coming from in a sense of, first off, just get moving, get doing something. Like if, for instance, if you're learning how to shoot and you get pretty much instantaneous feedback, if you're aiming at a target, similar to me kicking field goals, if I'm aiming at through the posts from 45 yards, if I miss wide right, like depending on how it feels through the kick, I've got that instant feedback. I go, well, I pushed that wide right. Well, why was that? Was there a strong wind coming from the left? Was my plant foot off? Were my angles incorrect? Was my posture across coming through the ball correct? And then you go back, you adjust, and you go again. That involves you being very, very self-aware and very, very conscious about how you're executing the skill in the first place. Like, is my follow-through driving through towards the target? Am I punching through the ball correctly? Are my approach steps right? And if you can correct those sorts of things on the fly, then that's very, very useful. But what's equally useful and accelerates that practice is the use of visualization. So, for instance, if you do it once and you do it perfectly, and you go, well, that felt absolutely mint. That was incredible. Like, what was it about that? What did you get right? What was the contact point on the ball? What was your approach? And you break it down that way. And then you start to visualize doing that again and again and again. And you visualize that perfect rep to the point where that movement that you executed to get that perfect rep feels second nature. And I think my whole point behind this is you can always visualize more perfect reps than you will ever be able to practice. And when you visualize something, the same neural pathways involved in that movement start to fire as well. And
yeah, so I recall reading about the study where I can't remember if it was in basketball. I think it was 3-pointers they had them throw, and I'll try and find it at some point before the end of the podcast. But
I've already got it. I'm prepared. I told you I've made notes.
Okay.
I got this shit ready to go.
So my question there would be, what if you have no idea what it is, and you therefore you're struggling to visualize it?
Okay, so pick a skill, any skill you want. Go.
Well, let's go with the practical example where you can really, really help us with it. So let's go kicking a field goal. Let's go with that one.
Okay, cool. Kicking a field goal. First thing I do, I'm going to have a look at some field goal kickers. This is what I did. I had a look at some really, really good field goal kickers. Went onto YouTube, Google it, watch the NFL, have a look at the best in the game, have a look at the best people that are doing it, see what they do. See what they do, see it from multiple angles, like watch them. That's step number one. That starts you visualizing it. You start thinking, okay, well, I've seen Justin Tucker kick 50, 55, 60, 67-yard field goals. Like, I'd like to be able to do that. Put yourself in his situation. See yourself performing his skill. And one of the things that I know is mint that AI is starting to do now is you can literally take a body scan of yourself and then imprint yourself on a game as like an NBA all-star. So I saw that they had this just regular fat guy on stage, and he walked around him with his phone. And then he had a game from the night previous, and there was one of the players had done something ridiculous, like dribble down the court, beat someone, dunked it. He goes, right, are you any good at basketball? He went, terrible. When was the last time you played? Years ago, kid. He was like, right, okay, you're about to do something awesome. And he just put it up on the big screen, and it's him in the clothes he's currently wearing. It's like his purple t-shirt, baggy shorts. He's wearing those clothes, and it shows him in his body doing the skills that this NBA player did and dunking it. And like, if you can visualize yourself doing that, that is already going to get those neural pathways firing. So go and observe. That is the first key to it. See it being done right, see it being done right, see it being done well, and then break it down. Think about it from there.
Okay.
Because if I said to you, right, okay, your first job is to just physically go and do the skill, and you say, right, okay, what's the skill? And I say it's kicking a field goal, and you go, what's a field goal? That's a problem. You have to understand the task first before you then try to go and execute. And if you're going to understand the task, you might as well see it being executed to a very high level to then go and perform it. So you've got some sort of blueprint as to how it should look. It's a little bit like a plan of building a house. So, right, we'll go and build a house. Well, what the fuck does a house look like? You got any plans? You got any ideas for me? Like, otherwise it's just someone's imagination. And before you know it, you've got a mud hut or an igloo or a stick shack. Like, you go, well, that's not what I wanted. I wanted a really nice house. Well, you need a plan. So anyway, sorry. I was going through my 5 kind of key steps to visualization before that. So I think I got to 3. So I did number 1, relax, quiet spot, comfortable place, relax, focus your mind. Number 2, get clarity, understand the skill for the outcome that you want. Number 3, sensory engagement, visualize the situation, the scenario, how it's going to feel, sight, sound, smells, taste, touch, all that kind of stuff. Number 4, emotional intensity. So include positive emotions into the visualization. So, for example, kicking the perfect field goal, firing the perfect shot at the target, hitting the perfect clean and jerk or the perfect snatch. Feel the joy, the confidence, the satisfaction, like PBs, PRs. Oh my God, so many people are going to miss out on PBs and PRs by not doing this. We're talking about being awesome at anything, not just doing stuff decent and doing all right at things. But if you're currently struggling to hit a PR, like let's say you've got a clean of 120 and you're desperate for 125, right? You know how 120 feels. You know how that feels to be successful at 120. Visualize how it feels to be successful at 125. Feel it, like build it into your nervous system, because otherwise, if you see it in your mind first, it becomes possible. If you see it in your mind first, it becomes possible. So feel the joy, the confidence, the satisfaction that comes through mastering the skill, hitting the PR, hitting the PB, making the shot, making the throw, winning the league, the cup, the whatever it is you're involved in. Visualize the emotional intensity of that. Then number 5, the final part of it is repetition and practice. Like visualize regularly, do it often, do it on a daily basis. The more frequently you do it and engage in that visualization progress, the more effective it becomes, the more you imprint it into your subconsciousness, the more you build it into your nervous system, the more you wire those movement pathways into your CNS. They're my 5 key components of visualization, doing it right, doing it effectively.
I like it. I like it. So there's not a great deal of disagreement. It's just I would probably put that repetition and practice at the start. You've still not sold me on it yet.
This is specifically to repetition and practice of visualization. Sorry, not necessarily physical.
Oh, so practice and repetition of more visualization.
Oh yes.
Okay. So
Like,
interestingly, one thing just to cut you off quickly there, sorry. It's my show today. It's my show. Visualizing the skill before you initially perform the skill, I'm absolutely on board with. And when you said about you know, when you first had to kick a field goal or whatever, watching people kick a field goal. So I think one thing that's really important, no matter what angle you come at this from, is understanding what the outcome and what it needs to look like, how it should feel, and what is actually right and what is wrong before you actually go out and give it a go. Have some level of understanding as to what it is so you can start connecting dots.
Yeah. That's what it is, isn't it? That's what movement is. It's what developing a skill is. It's just connecting one dot to the next dot to get better and better. It's a dot to dot puzzle. So, do you want to go through that basketball study?
Please hit us with the basketball study.
Right. I love this name, by the way. Fucking love this name. Dr. Blaslotto. Dr. Blaslotto.
Is that one name or is that first and last name?
That's his last name.
Oh, okay.
His first name's not Doctor. That's his title.
No, I thought is it Blaz space Lotto?
No. Blaslotto. Just one word.
Like
right. So his study was conducted.
Good.
Sorry, I said his. Might not be a he. There are female doctors. Dr. Blaslotto's study was conducted by, so asked a group of students who'd been randomly selected.
If it was a woman, would it be Dr. Blaslotto?
No, I don't know. So a group of students who'd been randomly selected to take a series of free throws, right? The percentage of made free throws was tallied. The students were then divided into 3 groups and asked to perform 3 separate tasks over a 30-day period. Group 1 was told not to touch a basketball for 30 days. No practicing, no playing basketball, nothing. All right. You can pretty much understand where this is going. That's not going to be a high-performing group. So the way to get good at anything isn't to have no involvement with it whatsoever. We'll find out. That's my hypothesis anyway. The second group was told to practice shooting free throws for half an hour a day for 30 days. Then the third group was told to come into the gym every day for 30 days and spend half an hour with their eyes closed, simply visualizing hitting every free throw. Right? After 30 days, all 3 groups were asked to come back, take the same number of free throws that they'd done at the beginning of the study, and this was the outcome. These were the results, right? The first group of students that didn't practice whatsoever showed no improvement. The second group had practiced every day and showed a 24% improvement. And the third group, which had simply visualized free throws, showed a 23% improvement. So there's 1% difference. So imagine the combination of the physical act of free throwing, like we're talking about joining the dots, and visualizing.
So there's a physical kinesthesia as well as the mental visual feedback. Wow. Have they tried doing the two together? Does it equate to 47%?
I don't know if it'd be 47%, but I suspect it would be significantly better.
Or whatever they were, was it 24 and 23? Whatever they were.
But this is what we're saying, isn't it? Like, if you want to be awesome at a skill, execute the skill, practice the skill, do it frequently, do it right, do it well, then visualize yourself doing it again multiple times, do it better in your mind, and keep joining those dots, keep bouncing between those two, and physically do it, visualize it, physically do it, visualize it, physically do it, visualize it. So, and like, I do it between sets in the gym, especially if you're lifting heavy, if you're lifting for PR, if you're competing. I mean, is it something that you do pre-competition? Do you do any sort of visualization before you go into a CrossFit comp? Whether it's physical or mental rehearsal, will include both factors.
I do physical rehearsal. I don't know if I really do mental rehearsal. I do mental rehearsal, what's the word? Involuntarily. when you're thinking about, well, you know what's about to go down, or you know what an event's going to be, and you're like, it does play through your head naturally anyway. So there's a really interesting point, actually, because I might be doing these things without even knowing that I do these things. Hence why I've just struggled to get on board with it. And therefore, if I'm thinking that, a lot of you guys would probably be the same as well.
So here's my thing. Imagine if you were actually conscious and consciously engaging in that process of visualizing how you wanted things to go. Do you think your outcomes would be any better?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with what you said in terms of, like, when you look at it as like sets and reps, you're doing mental reps, but because you're visualizing it like you're going to do it and do it right, rather than obviously when you actually physically do a rep, there's a greater percentage chance of something could go wrong, or you might not quite time something correctly or anything like that. Whereas with a visual one, you can really walk yourself through it at full speed and do it correctly before having ever done that before physically.
Another question, it's like, obviously when we used to play football, you know, if you were taking a penalty, if you're standing there looking at the ball on the spot, you're looking at the goal, what's your thought process in that moment?
I'm going to be honest with you, Alex. Being born in England, I'm shit at penalties. I didn't really think much when I took penalties. I just hit it hard and missed most of them. Go on though. So what was your point? What would you do there? Sorry.
So, I mean, my whole point in that situation is, whilst you're in that spot, in that moment, before you execute the skill, see yourself do it beforehand. Like, visualize the ball going into, like, if you're aiming for the top left, visualize the shot, visualize what you're doing, visualize how you're approaching the ball, how you're striking it. Experience the outcome before it's actually happened, and it will become reality. And I think a lot of the time, where people get this wrong is that when they're in those pressure moments, they have all those doubts and fears, and their physiological state flips into one of, like, a little bit of fear, anxiety, posture changes, breathing changes, heart rate goes up, and they become, like, quote unquote, nervous, versus understanding that they're actually excited. This is the body's state of preparedness. they've got a feeling like they're going to be successful. They've performed the skill multiple times before. They remind themselves of that. They remind themselves of all the practice shots they've taken every time they've executed it perfectly, and see themselves being successful. And it changes that physiological state. Different hormones are released, posture changes, breathing changes for the better. And it allows that relaxed, focused state of flow to kind of creep in for you to then perform at your best. So I think if you get wrapped up in shit, I'm gonna miss, I'm worried about missing, I'm nervous about missing, I might miss, and missing is constantly going through your head, what do you think is most likely to happen if that's what you're thinking about and how you're feeling, how you are in the moment? You're not going to perform well. Worried, nervous, and full of doubt will get you out.
Yeah, it's kind of like touching on like the concept of the self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? It's like you believe and affirm and basically instill the fact that you will score the goal or get a field goal or whatever, and therefore you basically believe it into fruition, and it does actually happen. I see. I visualize. I see. I see. So, would you say then more beneficial to do, or actually, this could be a three-way. Is it more beneficial for an absolute beginner first starting out, or is it more beneficial as a top like 1% for the people who are already like towards the top of the game and like they're at the elite level, or would you say it's equal across the entire spectrum for the people that are starting out, for the people at the top of the game, and for the people that are in the middle of those two extremes?
It's a tricky question, that, because like if you've got a young kid at a young age, if I mean, if you could teach them to visualize from a young age, I do think it would accelerate the learning. I think that there'll be other skills that we'll discuss in the next couple of episodes through this how to be awesome at anything that will 100% accelerate learning, skill acquisition from a very early age. Equally for the people at the top of the game, you know, if you're in the top 1%, if you're the one visualizing and physically practicing versus someone who is only physically practicing and or maybe kind of half visualizing and not really committing to it, I think you would see a substantial difference in outcome. Like I believe that, you know, the likes of Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi, I think that when it comes to goal setting and understanding what they want, they 100% know how to get there. And I do believe that they sit down and visualize it and spend time focusing on it, how it's going to feel. Essentially, all the things that we've spoken about in this episode. And if you're the one that's doing it versus someone else who isn't, I think, you know, there's a high likelihood that you will exceed what they're capable of. So, I mean, it's really difficult to tell what the difference is, if any, because it's just learning and development in process. People are always going to be better than others. But what's the difference maker? And I think this is absolutely a tool that needs to be utilized, and it works for any sport. Works for any sport, any skill, anytime, any place.
Yeah, so I was also thinking it even works in different ways, kind of like what you're saying about there when you and even touching on when you said about emotional intensity and stuff. People do this without knowing they do this. Like when people tune into listening to certain music or certain like speeches or whatever, where they are, I guess they call it like pumping themselves up or getting into a state, they're setting their physiological state. But actually what you're saying there is you can not only get yourself into the correct physiological state, but you can create the neural links to actually improve your capacity to perform the skill. So for an everyday person that might be listening who goes to the gym, it could be you sit there if you're about to do a heavy back squat. Let's just use a really simple example. You're about to do a heavy back squat. You tune yourself in, think about how it's going to feel listen to whatever music you're listening to, imagine what you're going to do, how it's going to look, the feeling, getting yourself back up, and you have literally, without touching the bar, you've done a rep. You've done a rep. You've already got a level of kinesthesia and experience, potentially better than if you'd actually performed the skill physically. And now you actually can go and perform the skill physically because you've not smashed yourself under the bar yet. So, okay, yeah, I like it. I like it.
So that's visualization in a nutshell.
Visualization, guys, and not just visualization, but a lot more to it there than I think most people realize or think about. Like, there's a huge physiological shunt if you can visualize properly and really set yourself in a state. You can really, really motivate yourself to carry out whatever the task is at hand. And like you said at the start, it's literally accessible to any skill, any task. Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, it's all right. Like I was just going to say then, and I wonder whether this might resonate differently with a few people. I just think a different angle of approaching it. But I'm just going to ask you: have you ever imagined what it'd be like to win the lottery?
Yes.
And like a
Oh,
substantial.
actually, hang on a minute. So here's the thing. So, and I'm genuinely saying this not to be a dick, but to be interesting, because I reckon we've all done this. We've all asked the question, what would you do if you won the lottery? But that's not the same as actually how would you feel? And like,
Part of it though, isn't it? Part of it. Like, what would you do
yeah,
if you won the lottery, right? So you go, oh, fucking hell, what would I do? First thing I do is I go on holiday. Right, okay. But how are you going to feel? Like, and as soon as you start
yeah,
thinking, well, what am I going to do with it? I'm going to go and buy a nice car. You start thinking how it's going to feel to buy the nice car and how it's going to feel to drive it. The experiences start to become real. Like, you get excited. Things change.
yeah,
Things in you change, don't they? Right.
yeah,
So the problem with that is you can visualize winning the lottery all you fucking like. It is not going to happen. Your visualization of that process is going to make very little difference other than your commitment to go and buy a lottery ticket. You're
Can I
still in
just
the lottery.
quickly
Go.
interject? So I actually read or reread. Do you remember that book you gave me a few years ago? I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called How to Outsmart Everyone or something like that.
Oh, how to? Yeah, yeah. I know the one
How
you're
to
on about.
how to predict the unpredictable or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, so for the people listening and watching, I read this book and there was an entire chapter about how to win the lottery, and it told you all these different things that you can do, different hints, different tips, different skills. And then the last line of the chapter was, all in all, your chance, as it was a quote from someone, it said, all in all, don't remember who the guy was, your chances of winning the lottery are about the same whether you play it or not. Sorry, carry on. I just had to
Yeah.
get that out.
So like the only thing like visualizing that, the only thing that's going to change and be any different is whether you commit to buying a ticket or maybe buying one ticket versus multiple tickets. Right. So it's kind of, I mean, yeah, it's good, but imagine if you applied that kind of thinking to your day-to-day goals, your day-to-day ambitions. Like if you would say, right, lottery doesn't exist, but you're going to have all those things that you would have if you won the lottery. How are you going to get there? Like, what's your passion? What's your journey? Like, and you start to map that out. But because, like you say, you have to join the dots. You have to connect those feelings, those emotions of that perfect outcome in your ideal scenario to where you currently are. And obviously, if it's in business, certain people are at different ends of that pathway. But you have to understand what it is you're aiming to achieve in the first place.
Yeah, I think a very easy explanation for that is it has to be some kind of skill. It can't just
Yeah,
be
yeah,
right, because you are actually building a skill, which is good because other than winning the lottery, which doesn't require skill, it requires something else.
look,
Like it's pretty much everything. It is pretty much everything.
it's luck in the lottery. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
like, when it comes to a non-lottery based pathway to success, it is all about skill acquisition, implementing specific patterns, behaviors, whether it's weight loss. It doesn't, like, everything has a set way of how things can be achieved. And it's finding that blueprint and following that blueprint and visualizing it, seeing it in your mind makes it possible. But I think that the point I was trying to make there is creating the emotional state that comes along with winning the lottery, and that euphoria of having all those things that can be applied to your day-to-day energy to get you moving, to get you to do those things. So, for example, in the situation of someone wanting to be fit versus being obese, well, visualize what it's going to be like when you're shredded, when you're strong as nails, when you're picking up anything you want and throwing it around. Like, visualize being successful, visualize being in that situation, visualize the ideal outcome, the perfect outcome that you perfect, or weird way to pronounce that, the perfect outcome you want, and then start to make it real by implementing practice.
Question for you. Good one as well.
Yeah.
Visualize the outcome or visualize the execution of the skill?
Both.
If you had to choose.
Fuck off. No, both.
Okay, that was the expected answer I thought you'd give. But important point for everyone listening, you need to visualize both, not just the end goal. Don't just visualize you being shredded. Visualize you doing the things that are required of you to get to that stage as well. Yes.
And for example, like, see it in first person. So see it as like as if you are performing the skill. So for instance, if I'm kicking a field goal, I'm going to be in me, like looking down at my holder, saying, right, that's where I need to put it. Take my steps back, walk out to the side, look through the post, pick my aiming point. I'm going to draw that line down through to where the ball's going to be spotted. I'm then going to go through my usual routine. I know the triggers I've got. I'm going to go through those, visualize those, get the feeling of that. Then give the little head nod that I do. And then it's just on the holder. As soon as I see that first trigger movement, that's when I'm going to go through my steps. I'm going to kick it and I'm going to see the ball sail through the post to that perfect end point where it's straight as a die, really nice height, really good distance. Then once you've done that and you've seen it in that first person, like, self mode, flip it, see it through someone else's eyes, see it from a different angle, see it from the angle of a spectator, see it through the angle of a commentator, see it through the lens of someone that might be watching on TV. And even, it doesn't matter, even if it's like 12-year-olds playing cricket, imagine you're on Sky Sports, imagine that, like, there's loads of cameras there, and like, if your end point is to be a high level performer, that stuff will be very real by that point. If you're playing for England or if you're playing for a top level side, those things are going to be there. So why not see it that way now and visualize what those people are going to see, what they're going to say, how it's going to look, how it's all going to move around like pieces on a chessboard. So see it from multiple angles.
See it from multiple angles, people. I like it.
So I think that'll pretty much take care of step one of the process, really. So we've got I know we haven't really asked you much on the physical repetition and practice side of it, but certainly the value in the use of that combined with the principles and the process of visualization done right will improve outcomes, improve results, result in accelerated learning and skill development, and ultimately increase the height of the ceiling for the long-term outcome. So 100% incorporate visualization into your practice, into your training, into your preparation for sport, competition, even day-to-day life. And like you said at the start, this is going to be pretty much a 3-part series. 2 of the other key components we will be focusing on in the next few episodes will be goal setting, and then a little bit of what we've just touched on there, but emotional states as well. So we'll be going into more details on those 2 things and a few other components of it as well. Chris, want to wrap it up?
I love it. I don't think there's anything else to add. So I hope everyone enjoyed that. If anyone does have any further questions, feel free to send them across to Alex_Lenkowski_performance. I assume names and stuff are in the footers when it comes out.
Yeah. Everything's in the description.
And as per usual, this will be released on Friday.
Well, they'll be listening to it already, Chris.
Yeah, of course you will. Yeah, you're already here. You're already here. Silly me. Well, if you are listening to this, this is the last one before Alexander becomes Mr. Alexander. So we'll have to congratulate him on the next one. We'll think of something.
What are you on about? I'm not having a sex change. I already am a mister. What are you on about?
You mean I missed your sex change?
Oh my God.
On that note, guys and ladies and everything else in between, we'll leave it there.
There is nothing else in between. There isn't.
Well, exactly. That's the point.
All right. Okay. So, ladies and gents, then, yeah.
Ladies and gents.
We almost went a full episode without mentioning it.
Do you know what? It must be like some kind of Tourette. Can you have a singular Tourette? Is that a thing?
It's just a trigger, isn't it? What is it that I've done that's triggered you to go down this tangent?
It's just.
Well, no, I'll tell you what, it was the other way around. You triggered me. You called me a mister, and I was like, I already am a mister.
Well, I don't know why you took it so personally.
You're trying to make it out like I wasn't a mister.
What, am I calling you a mister? Oh, wow.
The last episode before he becomes a mister. What the fuck? Anyway, we're absolutely butchering this outro.
Best outro we've ever had. We should swap it and put it for the intro.
Yeah, there's no additionally useful information coming this way, guys. So if you're happy,
don't do drugs.
Yeah, don't do drugs. Don't do steroids.
Whether they are performance enhancing or sex reassigning.
I wondered where you were going to go with that.
Yeah, well done, everyone.
The other actual useful thing would be if you are listening, if you've managed to endure the full episode again, we really, really appreciate it. Please leave us a review. Tell us what you think. If worth listening to. Please share the podcast as well, because that really helps us out. That'll be absolutely class. So make sure you do that on your podcast directory, whether it's the iTunes, Apple Podcast, or Amazon or other. Please leave us a review. Let us know what you think to the podcast, and we will aim to improve on your feedback. For instance, the feedback that we've had regarding the sound and the microphones. I hope that we've sussed that out now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I see you've not got your microphone in front of you. Nice.
No, but it's right here.
Oh, okay. Well, we do listen to you guys.
We do.
Lastly, just before we do say goodbye, if anyone does want to try visualizing winning the lottery, if you want to try something every day for a month and let us know how that goes, feel free. The other thing I would say is obviously what we're talking about is skill acquisition. It will not make you perfect at a skill. You do need to keep doing these things for a very, very long time to get better at it. It won't ever make it perfect. But on that cheerful note, Lenko out.
Brilliant little disclaimer, that, Chris. Brilliant. I love that. Take care, guys. We'll see you next time.